So welcome everyone. Thank you for being here tonight and for bundling up on sort of a chilly fall evening now that the weather has really turned into fall. We appreciate you coming. My name is Phil Huffman. I am on the Waitsfield Conservation Commission, which I've been a part of since it was founded in 2003. And I'm one of the co-chairs of the steering committee for the Conservation and Recreation Visioning Project, which is the convener for this gathering, as you probably all already know. At any rate, we're really glad to have a chance to come together with those of us who are here tonight, and also for folks that are watching on MRV TV, either live stream, I think, and also probably recorded along the way. So we're hoping that lots of folks will get a chance to sort of engage in this either in person or virtually as we go forward. I want to just spend a minute allowing my fellow members of the steering committee from the Conservation Recreation Visioning Project to introduce themselves, and also our very capable project managers. So I guess maybe if we can just go one by one quickly, and I think we probably won't want to take the time to hand around the microphone, so for the sake of the viewing audience, if you can really project as you introduce yourselves. So maybe I'm just going to start closest to me, and if you can stand up and just introduce yourself briefly, that'd be great. Again, members of the steering committee project team.
Hi everyone, I'm Emily Friedman. I'm the community project manager for CRV.
I'm Bob Kogan. I'm on the recreation side of things. I'm also the Mountain Riders Board president.
Hi, I'm Isha Golf, and I'm director of Mad River Plan.
Good evening, everybody. Ira Shaddis, I'm the director of Friends of the Mad River, and I'm on the leadership team of this year.
Brian Clintz with the Basin Conservation Commission.
Clark?
Mark Amazon with Mad Dog Chapter Trial.
Eric?
Good evening, Eric Baruzzi. I'm with the Mad River Ridge Runner Snowmobile Club.
Laura Artisan, I'm the executive director of the Mad River Recreation District, and I'm also co-chair with Phil of CRV.
Mark?
Mark Haverly, president of the Mad River Valley Backcountry Coalition, and I'm the Wreck and Trail subgroup.
Chris?
Chris Stevenson, Moortown, Vermont, part of chair of the rec committee there, and the Vermont Fair Initiative, and Park Mountain Foundation.
Joey?
Hi, I'm Joey Carey, and I represent Treebush Resort on the CRV steering.
And Alan?
Alan Quackenbush, Duxbury Land Trust.
Great. Did I miss anyone from the steering committee for the CRV project? Okay. So there are a couple of folks at least who aren't able to be here tonight. One who I want to give a special shout out to is George Schenk, who, as I think we all know, is the owner here at Flatbread and is on the Warren Conservation Commission. George, really disappointed not to be able to be here. He came down with a cold and it feels like he's contagious, so for his sake and ours, he decided to keep his distance. Really unfortunate, but so it goes. Jim Hedgecombe is also on the Warren Conservation Commission, and I thought was maybe going to be here. We'll see if he rolls in at some point. I think I may be forgetting one or two others. Oh, TJ Greenwood on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce. I think that's about it. Anyway, I hope that you get a sense from those introductions that we have a great mix of people on the steering committee from both organizations across the valley that are involved in leading on conservation-related initiatives, from the conservation commissions, from the towns or related similar boards, the Friends of the Mad River and whatnot, and then also from the recreation side, the sort of key recreation interests and valley-wide entities like the Chamber of Commerce. Also, the Planning District has been sort of a satellite member of the steering committee. So we've got a great group of folks, and ultimately this is all about a community dialogue, which tonight is a next important step in of trying to really figure out how we collectively and together try to figure out the optimal integration of things that we value highly in this community. vibrant outdoor recreation opportunities for all the benefits that that provides, and a vibrant, healthy environment and all of the ecological assets and attributes that go along with that. So that's what this is all about. Very quickly for this evening, we've got a sort of packed agenda and want to keep things moving. We're going to spend the next 20 minutes or so, maybe a little less, just sharing some insights and sort of takeaways from the survey that we did of community members over the course of the summer. We got somewhere upwards of 200 responses to that, which we thought was not bad. So some interesting information from that that Laura's going to share for us. And then we're going to shift and do a panel discussion with a couple of folks from the recreation community and a couple of folks from the ecological side of things to talk about looking ahead and what are the desired conditions that we have for the ecological integrity and the recreational opportunities here in the valley. So we'll have steering committee members participating in that panel discussion, and then we'll open it up for questions, dialogue with you all. And then we're going to shift gears in the last chunk of the meeting, probably 45 minutes or so, is going to be breaking up into what we're calling sort of science fair style tables. So we'll have tables, 5 different tables, and you all can choose which one or ones you want to participate in. I'll say more about what those are when we get to that point in the agenda in a little bit. So that's the game plan for now. I hope that all sounds okay. Thank you again all for being here. And I'm going to turn it over to Laura to talk about the survey. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Phil. Oh. And thank you for being here. This is our 3rd community forum. We also held 2 different informational sessions last winter. So as you heard, we have many partners, but we wanted to involve more community members. So we did a survey that had a dozen questions. It was open for about a month last summer. And the full survey and analysis, Arrowwood Environmental is helping us in a couple of different ways. They have done mapping and are advising us. They came up with a list of key ecological assets that we want to think about protecting. So they also did some analysis and helped us with this survey. So it was available to the public for 4 weeks last summer. We got it out in a variety of different ways. 214 responses to the 12 questions, and most of the respondents lived in the valley. We wanted to get more information to help the steering committee as we make decisions and plans moving forward, so a broader slice of the community. So the first takeaway is that recreational use of trails and trail networks is high and valued. I mean, we all knew that. We asked some questions about what people valued in a trail experience. And I'm going to go through this pretty fast, but all of these questions and an even more detailed report is on mrvrd.org. So that's Mad River Valley Rec District.org. We're the fiscal sponsors of this project, which came to us through VORAC, the new bridge and trails and all sorts of things that you've seen being developed in the community, and conservation and recreation visioning is one component of that big $408,000 VORAC grant. So the second key takeaway is people place a high value on both recreational and ecological resources and are concerned about this balance. People around the world, or around the U.S., are dealing with this, trying to figure out how to have great recreation, but also continue with ecological integrity. So we asked concerns on various topics, and you'll see, overuse, sustainability, invasive species are all very high on the list. Dogs are high. We had varying opinions about how dogs should be handled on trails, and you'll see other concerns. Another key takeaway is that some people have familiarity with these basic ecological features and principles that may impact recreational trail use and development. And as Phil said, the second half of tonight, we're going to divide up into 5 tables, and one of them is on the key ecological priorities that Arrowwood helped identify in the Mad River Valley, and we hope we can protect. So that will be an opportunity for you later if you want to learn more about those. It's also on the Rec District's website. So the fourth key takeaway is that it's important to manage this to minimize environmental impacts. But most people feel like the watershed is healthy and in good condition now. So that's good news. It's obviously people's opinions. So, you know, we look to people like Ira, who's the head of the Friends of the Mad River, to, you know, give us actual reports on how the river is doing. But, you know, we're glad that people are comfortable with, you know, all aspects of recreation and environmental integrity. So we asked people what activities you support that aim to balance these two concerns. And the reason I wanted to share this slide is that some of the decisions that the CRV steering committee are going to need to make moving forward as we draft documents is considering the techniques we might use to mitigate any environmental damage or concerns through recreation. So, you know, you could do a seasonal trail closure or a time of day closure. You could have any of these different ways to mitigate the impact of recreation on nature. And code of conduct, later Bob Kogut will have a table where that's a topic, because a lot of people in our survey said they'd like to see a code of conduct for the Mad River Valley. 68%, in fact, said yes. So Kingdom Trails has a really great program they've developed over the years, and they have videos and all sorts of things, and we might want to look at that as we craft one of our own that, you know, fits the needs of the Mad River Valley. How important is it to manage and then minimize environmental impact? So very important, and somewhat important gets you to over 90%. So we really feel that our community thinks this is important work, and so do you. That's why you're here. Thank you. Another key takeaway is that the people who responded to this survey, overall message indicates that the work is important and it's valued by our community, and we wanted to make sure that we brought more people in, and that's why we did this survey. And as you'll see, of the 214 people who responded, 67% had not been to one of these meetings or informational sessions before. So that's pretty exciting that we got a bunch of people who are now engaging with us. We have their emails. We invite them to participate in other ways. So, you know, thank you if you filled out the survey, and I'll open it up to questions now. If you have questions, we may have to pass them on to Arrowwood, who did the analysis, but we might be able to answer some of them right here and now. And the full survey and analysis is on Mad River Valley Recreation website. Because Ira represents the river.
Relatively speaking, yeah, the watershed is pretty healthy. You know, you could look at a couple different metrics. Like you could look at, you know, our habitat blocks relative to the habitat blocks you might find near Shelburne, right? And so we certainly have attributes that lean us towards being a healthier watershed. But we're not without impacts, certainly. You can look at the main stem and the presence of, you know, knotweed along it. You can look at disconnected floodplains, lack of woody material in the river. You know, it sort of depends on which species shoes you're putting on that will really characterize the degree of health that we're aiming for. And so part of the work that we're doing with this group, and that's been really beneficial with the sort of ecological integrity sub-working group, is to sort of identify some of those key characteristics that we do have, and now we've been really having some great conversations about where are there sort of restoration opportunities, and to look at it in that sort of almost project or piecemeal-based approach rather than to sort of give a sweeping generalization about the health of the watershed.
Thanks, Ira. Other questions? If there are not other questions, I will just make 2 announcements about upcoming events. We have another community forum like this that will be November 20th. It's going to not be here because it might be a little cold or colder, and it'll be at the Valley Players Theater, so we'll be publicizing that. And then on October 20th, we're going to have the grand opening of the Recreation Hub. That's at the intersection of Route 100 and 17, and it's also the Mad River Valley Recreation District's 30th anniversary. Liza is here. She used to be the board chair, and so we're going to have a joint celebration, a ribbon cutting on the bridge, and different activities. So, save the date.
All right, thanks, Laura, for the announcements and also for the run-through of the survey results. And I just want to echo, the survey provides a lot of really interesting and helpful information that we on the steering committee are still trying to digest and sort of factor into our thinking. But I think it's, of broader interest to the community as a whole. So I'd encourage you to just go and take a look at it again. It's at the mrvrd.org website, and there's a whole section on there about the Conservation Recreation Visioning Project, and the survey results are there as part of that with the great report that Arrowwood did, so go dig into it along with other things. Okay, so as I mentioned at the top, we're going to shift gears now and go into a panel discussion for the next, half an hour or so, 25 minutes. And we're going to start by having a few members of the steering committee come up, and I think we'll just have people in chairs up here at the front of the room. Ira Shaddis is going to moderate the panel, and Ira, important to note, is the chair, if you didn't catch it before, chair of the Ecological Integrity Working Group, so one of our 2 working groups. So he's going to chair the panel, and the other participants are going to be Clark Amadon from Trout Unlimited and Moortown, who's been a part of the Ecological Integrity Working Group, and then Misha Golfman and Bob Kogut, who have been part of the Recreation and Trails Working Group. And we had been planning and hoping to have George Schenk as another member from the Ecological Working Group, but as I mentioned before, he's out sick. So we're going to just let that be. We're going to miss George's insights. He's got some great ones on all of this, so that's a loss for us, but we'll do the best to backfill. So I think we'll get the panel going, start with the folks that I just mentioned, and then we'll also provide an opportunity, Ira can navigate this, on giving other folks from the steering committee a chance to offer perspectives, and then we will open it up for questions and comments, observations from all of you from the community who are not a part of the steering committee as we go forward. So give us just a sec to rearrange, and then I'll turn the mic over to Ira. Thanks.
Great. Yeah, so I think we're going to stand. Just whatever you guys want to do works for me. So the panel discussion, the purpose of sort of bringing this this moment together is to talk about the desired condition statement, which is sort of a wonky name to describe this document that is actually a really, it's been a sort of an amazing document to work on together as a group and really sort of hash out what a vision for a robust sort of ecologically healthy watershed could look like, and what a sort of robust, mature recreational trail-based network could look like. So that's sort of the backdrop is this this document, and how it came to be made. And so rather than sort of going through in a point-by-point presentation, we thought we would sort of go to the source and ask these guys how it came about, sort of what it means for them in their own work, bringing it back to their organizations, and sort of what they see it turning into as part of the Conservation Rec Visioning project, and then open it up to all of you for discussions. And hopefully this sort of whets your appetite to read this 18-page document at some point on your own. So I just wanted to dive into it with Bob, and so the question really is just, how did this come about? What was the purpose and the background of this desire condition statement?
Maybe I'll start by going a little farther back. So we didn't have a group like this where all the kind of conservation groups in the valley and the recreation groups kind of got together on a regular basis. We did it a lot on an ad hoc basis. Here and there, we as the Mad River Writers may be talking to the Warren Conservation Commission about something once in a while. But generally what drives the kind of the development of trail networks and the consideration of ecological benefits is whoever owns the land or is kind of the land manager or the land management practices in place for a bit of land. So for us, often that's like, say it's state land in the valley, like the Howe Block of the State Forest. So we would work with the Agency of Natural Resources. We'd work with their environmental consultants. We'd go through a long process about, kind of consider a lot of these things. But we would not be involving the Waitsville Conservation Commission or the Facing Conservation Commission, even though we're right in their town. And it just hadn't really kind of occurred to us that that was the process. And that's not, so, we've had some like kind of back and forth a little bit over the years, and then it probably goes back to the start of this thing was with Corey Miller, when we started this, deciding to kind of go after this grant. And the grant, it was about the grant in big terms was about linking the town to the trails, trying to create a recreation hub and trying to create kind of a bit of a community center around the values of both recreation and ecology. And then she was smart to realize that, well, we really should kind of like drill in on that idea. So that's why part of this grant is not just building this bridge over the brook. It's about how do we get all the conservation groups together with the trail groups. So we're doing this like voluntarily, all the conservation groups and all the recreation groups, we decided to work together. There's no like state law making us do it. There's no town law making us do it. There's not even a management practice for a chunk of forest that's telling us to do it. We all voluntarily think it's a good idea to proactively work together, share information, kind of before we do projects and find out the best way to do them. So that's how it got started. It's funded through the end of this year. One of the big things we're doing at the end of this year is to figure out how to keep it going beyond the funding and beyond the funding of this grant. So Laura's like little breakout science fair table is going to be covering that topic.
Thank you, Bob. So in the desire condition statement, one of the earliest pieces that we emphasize is exactly what Bob was just talking about. It's sort of the collaborative spirit and maintaining that as a core piece of what is necessary to maintain this balance of EI and rec. And then there's also some more sort of nuts and bolts stuff in there as well, specific attributes about ecological integrity, so some of the stuff that Arrowwood mapped and brought together, some of those assets, and then desired conditions about trails and linkages and sort of what we hope to see that mature trail network look like. So I think that the hope with George and some of the rec folks, and it's unfortunate that George is not here because he's very good at sort of the big picture and the big takeaways, was to get a sense from folks who worked on it, what were the big takeaways? What are the real highlights for them as they went through and made this desire condition statement? So I'll start with Clark, if that works for you. If you could just talk about, what were some of the, the big takeaways, the really meaningful or meaty pieces of the desire condition statement for you?
Well, I think for us, and I'll see if I can channel George a little bit here. Not an easy place to do it either, but I'll try. I think one of the things that George brought in here that was thought-provoking and also educational for us was he had done a lot of reading on E.O. Wilson, famous Harvard biologist who worked a lot with ants, as many of you may know. But he also has a wonderful way of synthesizing the natural world in terms of where the risks are. And George brought that to us continually, making sure that we were thinking about, when you think about a trail network or even a river or upland streams, that all of those have sometimes very obvious interconnections and sometimes connections that we don't readily see. And George sort of helped us and kept urging us to make sure that we took a look at the valley as a whole. And sometimes that was uncomfortable in some ways because that was sort of stretching us to think about the environment and the world outside of the Mad River Valley. But his perspective, I think, really helped us imagine the valley dealing with and working with all of the challenges of how a trail intersects or may come near a sensitive feature in the valley, but also what does just the use of fossil fuels in the valley mean here in terms of just getting to the places that we may recreate in. And I think for me in this, Trout Unlimited is an organization that does a lot of very nitty-gritty boots on the ground, but also advocates in a very big way for connecting systems. Been very active in California and taking down the dams on the Klamath River, and active in the Pacific Northwest and taking down dams on the lower Snake River. So for me, this way of really expanding how we see the valley as a whole, rather than sort of chunking it up into little pieces. It's not just, well, is this trail appropriate in this particular place, but just what does it mean to have trails, period? What does it mean in terms of the movement of animals or both aquatic and terrestrials, and what does that mean in terms of how humans interact? Where do they go? How do they get to these places? And once they get to these places, how do they disperse out? And so that was part of the process that I think was very valuable for the group, is to make sure that we were constantly sort of encouraged to encompass all of the valley and keep that constantly in mind for us. That was really, I think, most valuable. And we all live in what we consider a very desirable place. We look at the environmental assets that we have and feel good about that for the most part. We're lucky to have recreational assets. The other thing that came up occasionally, but not a lot because that wasn't the focus of the group, was I'm also on the Planning Commission in Moortown. And one of the things that occasionally came up were, well, okay, so we have recreational opportunities that we want to nurture. We have an environment that we want to nurture and support. We also have people who need housing, and we need places to put those houses, and we need infrastructure in order to allow people to get back and forth. So that's also another thing that I think of as on the Planning Commission in Moortown, trying to figure out how to support the growth of affordable housing and more housing, but at the same time offer recreational experiences, which are really a nexus for what this place means in the Mad River Valley, but also continue to be able to look outside our homes and travel in the valley and feel really lucky to live here. And so that is a lot of what being on this group and being in this committee has meant to me. And also I think the work has been instrumental in bringing together groups of people that I think probably will continue to interact and have a very, and now that we know one another, it'll be a lot easier to do that. A phone call or just regular gatherings, I think, will continue to help us move forward to provide great recreational opportunities and provide us with a wonderful place to live in a clean environment and a connected natural world.
Thank you, Clerk. Yeah, I would just, echo being on the Ecological Integrity Working Group. Going through and building this document really was a great opportunity for those of us who work on sort of ecological integrity issues in a day-to-day way to connect. And I see there being sort of great seedbed for work to come, and it being relevant for many future discussions as well. And I also hope that, through this process, the recreation folks are also environmental advocates, right? They become more capable to take on that role as well. And then I think we're able to collectively as a community have a sort of more robust conversation about something like housing from, how does it intersect with recreation access? How does it intersect with, the ecological health of this place? But with everyone at the table being that much more informed. And so I've been really appreciative of working on this proactive vision in that way, as it gives us sort of a shared language to draw from in many ways moving forward. And so I'm basically the same question to you, Misha, which is sort of, what did you take away from, test. What did you take away from, working on the desired condition statement, sort of reflecting on the work of the Rec and Trails group?
I love working on desired conditions because it's looking into the future. When I started in this group, and I started later, when the process was already happening, we had quite a bit of tension between recreation and conservation. There was also, I don't think we had a full trust. When we were asked, one of the first things we did for each other, we were asked as recreation groups to present all our future plans to the conservation groups. And I remember how apprehensive we were about going and talking about our short, medium, and long-term plans. The question was, what is this really about? Is this about conservation groups trying to have control over recreation valley so that any new trail has to be approved by new bureaucracy? As time went on, and we were forced by this process to listen to each other. And this is where this is such a valuable process. Sit and listen to other people. The recognition, and this is my reflections, for me, recognition that we all have shared values. There is really no disagreement here. We all recognize that the future is going to be here whether we like it or not. And standing on the way of the future, remember the building of the interstate and people standing across the interstate, those stories? Us standing on the way isn't going to help. So if we actively participate in bringing in the future, we influence it. The only way to make future desirable and exciting is to actively shape it. And we together, what I learned listening to all the conservation folks, that the future for Mad River Valley, the desirable future, is a future where the ecology is not only not degraded any further, but is enhanced, where species are coming back, where the water, where the river is reclaiming its natural corridor. And that is the kind of future that will bring to us economic prosperity. Because the other future that we all know, and I hear about it many times a day, because every day I count, I started counting. It could be anywhere between 2 and 10 times in my meetings with people when people say, well, we don't want to be like Stowe. You all heard that? So that's what's going to happen, right? If we don't plan for the future, because this is the place of immense beauty. That's why I came here. That's why many of you who weren't born and raised here in 10th generation, that's why many of you came here too. That's why 8 billion people who live on Earth, for whom we, as a thriving democracy, want for them to have opportunities to travel, right? We want prosperity for the rest of the world. This is where they're all going to come to visit. To say that we don't want visitors, that we want this for ourselves or for a small group of selective people. I'm sure that none of you who are here share that view. So then the question becomes, people are coming, and more people are going to come as time goes on. How do we give rights to nature and include nature as not a visitor, but as a resident here? How do we not allow the kind of development that will push the animals further up the hills until they disappear, etc.? And that was the heart of this project for me, is recognizing that it is time, and I came here this beautiful time when the recreation is maturing, taking its place in community, and it's really incredible privilege to be part of this process.
Thank you, Misha. I think you captured some of the sort of the global big picture spirit that George would have brought it to this conversation as well. So I really appreciate that. So let's just thank these panelists real quickly. So hopefully you got a little bit of an insight there into just sort of the spirit and the thinking and the activity that went into building this document. And so you can sort of bring that perspective to the document when you take it home and read it tonight before bed. But I'm sure some of you may have already gotten a chance to read it, or maybe you just have your curiosity sparked by what some of the panelists said now. So let's roll into a little Q&A if folks want to ask our panelists any questions.
The desired future conditions, they're great.
Actually, I should have said at the start of the evening, for those of you who haven't already had a chance to introduce yourselves, if maybe you could do that when you ask a question or offer a comment, just so everyone knows who's who.
Thank you, Phil. Kevin Anderson, I live in Waitsfield. As I was saying, I did read the desired future conditions. They're very good. But one thing I noticed that was missing was the term crowding. And so I'm wondering if the drafters sort of considered overcrowding and whether we ought to be sort of monitoring use and sort of managing use to prevent overcrowding, or to make sure that use of the trail network is kind of distributed across like the full network, as opposed to being concentrated in particular areas.
Thanks. Okay, I'll try to answer that. So, we are going to do some trail metering as part of this project, which mostly is going to go next year beyond the project funding ends, but we'll do that. I'll bring up a topic that's very related to that, and I'll try to answer the question that way. So one of the key things we learned from the experts that we gathered here was that one of the most important ecological aspects is contiguous forest blocks that are not intersected by roads, by trails, or by other development. So, in terms of crowding, you're better off in a given area to protect maybe a large portion of that area and concentrate your recreation activity or your commerce activity in a smaller portion. And that impact is less on the whole kind of environmental kind of watershed and the animals in the area. So that's one of the key takeaways we're looking at is that's one of the high aspects. There's 13 kind of identified ecological assets. My takeaway, my personal opinion was that contiguous forest blocks is probably up there, number 1, 2, 3. So when we're looking at trails that exist and trails that we want to plan, we're thinking about kind of trying to keep as much of those areas untouched as we can. And that may necessitate more kind of dense kind of activity in another area. So as for limiting totally the amount of people that come to the valley, I don't think we can do that. So it's put the trails in places where they have the minimum impact, and then when people come and use them, the impact is minimized by the structure of what we've created. And another related thing we learned from the experts was like a use of a trail. They basically have measured and animals' response to humans using a trail. And it's not, the response is not proportional or not driven by the number of times the trail is used very much. There's a graph that's like, if a trail is used extremely infrequently, it's not much impact. If it's used by even as much as like 1, 2, 3 times a day, that kind of ramps up to a measurable impact. If it's then used by many, many, many more people, the impact actually doesn't change much until it gets to be like, you know, maybe a very high numbers. So trying to like put less people on a trail and say, oh, it's only going to be used a few times a day, that few times a day has already kind of hit a pretty decent threshold of impact. So that's you know, so we keep that in mind when we think about where we're going to put recreational assets. Is that okay? Okay. All right. Hold on just a second.
Can you just introduce yourself?
I'm Kim Phelan, we're in Fayston, and my question, I have not read the report yet, is what are the top 3 concerns in the area? Is it overcrowding? Is it trail use? Is it inability to get new trails? What are the top 3 things that we are seeing as problems in the valley so we can target and zero in on those things?
So I'll just give you like 1 or 2 for recreation, and then maybe Ira can give you, you know, from the conservation side. So recreation, like I would say our number 1 thing is connectivity. You know, both from the Mad River Path and for the Mad River Riders, it's not about putting a lot more trails in. It's about kind of connecting people to different places. So we want to be able to have off-road kind of safe ways to travel between, you know, assets of the community, between the schools, between Sugarbush, and between areas like that, and have those connection points be as low impact as we can on the environment. And we also want to have those connection points to kind of link some of our disparate like kind of trail areas. So we've got Blueberry Lake way out on its own, and we got some other ones. Can we link those in a way that doesn't require you to like bike down the middle of 100, and can we do that in a low impact way? So Misha's got this long plan, which I'm on the board to help him kind of work on it, of having a human path through the length of the valley, perhaps from Warren as far as even Moortown, Middlesex. So from the recreation side of things, having that actually be realized would be kind of a great backbone to the recreational network. We wouldn't have to like put a trail through the woods to kind of connect an area. We can have things that kind of go down to that path. That backbone becomes the way to get kind of around the valley, and then you're maybe in a different area. So that's high on our list.
Can I add to one more?
Oh, yeah, sure.
From the recreational perspective, we have a lot of trails, but we don't have hardly any accessible trails that are accessible to historically excluded groups of people. So we also don't have trails that are accessible to people with physical disabilities. We don't have any adaptive trails. We also have a lot of trails that are eroding because those trails were built well before we knew how to build sustainable trails. We are lacking infrastructure such as bathrooms and in some places areas to park. So for the number of people who visit the valley, we don't have adequate recreational infrastructure, and we may not be friendly to people who are not white people. We may not be friendly to people who need to travel by means of a wheelchair or an adaptive bike. We may not be friendly to families with children. It's hard to find a place to learn how to bike in the valley on your tricycle. We're a mountainous area. So those are some of the concerns we learned about.
So as you can see, it's hard to name a top 3. I will say from the ecological integrity side of things, we really looked at this in relationship to trails and recreation. So that's sort of the context that I'll try and give some answer to. And the first piece is that we have this sort of list of 13 key ecological assets. And so it's not 3, it's 13. And they're not ranked. And we've actually talked quite a bit about some of the difficulties of trying to rank and compare these different features. But each of them does have a sort of management opportunity that could come with it. And so as you dive into an individual sort of ecological feature, you can sort of ask the question of what might be the way we effectively engage with that feature to steward it over the long haul. So I'll say with that, there's 2 points of emphasis that I would make. One is, connectivity. It's true as well in the ecological world as well. And those big contiguous forest blocks, the ability for aquatic habitat to be connected, when we think about a changing climate and the impacts that will have on the sort of changes to the landscape, the ability for species to migrate between different regions of the watershed will be significant for their sort of long-term health. And then the other piece I'll make is, I sort of alluded to this earlier, but being able to have our recreation partners, the recreation leaders in the community, and people out doing sort of trail-based recreation be informed about sort of the ecology of the place where they are, and to then be able to take that knowledge and apply it as a good steward. I'd say it's maybe not a dire issue, it's not a problem, but it's a really great opportunity for us to sort of generate a future where we're all sort of doing our part to take care of the ecological integrity of this place.
I would just add one little bit of that is that Bob mentioned the Kingdom Trails Ride with Gratitude and talking about coming up with something for the valley like that. And I think what that document does, and perhaps a document in the valley, can put together the recreational and the environment together, because that, I think, will allow folks to begin to be aware of what features are around, what we have in terms of environmental assets, and also linked in with the recreation. So for someone who's going very quick, very fast on a downhill on their bike, is not going to take time to, at that moment, to really kind of pay attention to what's around them. But by having that document in front of them, it will remind them at the trailhead when they're done having a beer at Lawson's afterwards, what the rest of this place means and what it represents.
So one of the things that Arrowwood Environmental identified is that we don't have good data on the wildlife corridors throughout the valley. We have really good data in Warren, thanks to the Warren Commission to, they've spent their money doing studies, but the rest of the valley, we need to put some money against, people on the ground researching where those wildlife corridors are, because that's important to avoid in trail development. So that's risen to our top of our list to find funding for, and I was hosted at the Rotary this morning talking to them about that need, and we're going to seek other funders to try and get more information on that. And we also have a bunch of hard copies of the desired conditions. It's on the REC website, but you might prefer to grab one of those copies to make it easier to read.
Peter?
I'm Pete Colgan with the Conservation Commission in Fayston. I have seen, you may have, a really cool macro level map of anticipated wildlife movement northward due to climate change and how that's projected to be. And there's a huge swath that goes over the Appalachians and comes right through here. So does the work that you've done so far, or should it in the future, talk about anticipating of okay, we have black bear, and we know all the species who live here now, happily, but that list is going to change, and how are we going to consider that?
Yeah, I'll say we haven't looked at that map or integrated that data directly, so to be totally fair. But we have sort of talked about some of those consequences indirectly and recognize that we have fairly robust, large corridors, wildlife habitat, forest blocks on the ridges, heading north-south on either side of the valley, but we lack. So the migrations are a little bit more subtle, a little bit more sort of random in how they actually move around. But yeah, that east-west sort of connectivity is something that we could certainly look to improve. And then in terms of, the actual impacts of sort of species distribution from climate change, that's above my pay grade. And is a pretty complicated issue because, it's not just about, black bears moving up, but it's about, how the mass stand of beech nut trees changes over a 30 or 40-year time span. And that has to do with the soils that you might find on a given slope. And so you just end up having this really complex sort of layering in terms of those changes. And so in a very gross way, we can say more is more, right? The more big blocks of diverse types of land that we can sort of conserve and protect for adaptability, the more likely we'll be able to see species, thriving in a robust way into the future.
I just want to build on that, Pete. Thanks for the question and observation. And I would agree with everything that Ira said. And I think that also more broadly, we've been thinking very much about this from a Mad River Valley watershed perspective. But we were just talking the other day with Arrowwood about the bigger picture, and that we need to be thinking about the connectivity not only within the valley but to the areas all around the valley for exactly the reason that you're getting at, both in the current as well as in the future. So that's one part of an additional response. And then I also want to just add that I think that what we're trying to do and what we hope is articulated, at least, a reasonable starting point in this desired conditions document around not only maintaining, but as some folks have already said, about enhancing or restoring ecological integrity in various aspects, not just the habitat connections, but other aspects of ecological integrity will provide, if we're successful in that, and this is over the long haul for the valley going forward, that will provide the environmental setting for species change over time. And it's not just wildlife, it's also plants and all this, fungi and other things that we don't think about so much, but that are every bit as much a part of the ecological system as anything else. So it's, again, trying to think about, kind of from a holistic way, that if we can take steps towards getting it better in the near term, that can help to provide the conditions that will get at some of the longer term things that you're pointing to.
I was just related, working through this all, we realized there's a lot of holes in the data that's available. And we hired Arrowwood to kind of pull the data from all these disparate sources that are around. There's state level data, there's local data, and they kind of put it all into this great map for us, but there's still a lot of missing information. Like we mentioned, that only Warren has decent data about wildlife corridors and the other towns don't. And there were other things that came up in the data, like, there's like beech stands. They're absolute perfect circles on the map, which is probably not how beech trees grow naturally. But it means like more work has to be done to kind of get out there and get some ground truth. So we all kind of recognize why we want to keep this thing going past this grant and establish this group is that we're going to have to continually be learning and collecting data. So as maybe more species move in because of climate change, we're kind of committed to keep learning and keep gathering new data, and that's how we'll kind of deal with that, I think. So.
Any other questions? How are we doing on time? Okay. Any other? Yeah.
In light of what Bob said, the big learning was that any trail is an impact, and that there was no correlation between density of users, that if there's a trail and the trail is used, it has impact on the wildlife, was quite of a revelation, because for us to recognize that we are working as groups with trails that are on the map. But if you look at the valley, if you create a map of all the trails, not only trails that are on the map, but all the trails on private property and trails on public property that are not mapped, that are quote-unquote unofficial trails. All of a sudden, there's not a lot of room for non-human life to be left in peace. And we have no jurisdiction and really no influence over that. And that recognition was an important takeaway for us.
So we did talk about how to solve that problem or just work towards that problem. And so, you know, we've learned a lot of things, and we're trying to figure out, like, what's the best way to, like, offer that information and that knowledge to private landowners, you know, in a nice way that doesn't turn them off in the first conversation. Just, you know, this information is available. We learned these things through this process, these considerations. You can kind of, like, you can do things in a way that gives you, you know, maybe kind of both sides of things that you want. You can kind of protect ecological integrity. You can still do recreation. You know, the balance can be made, and these are the kind of considerations. So we're trying to figure that out, like, how do we can share this map, we can share some of the data we have more broadly, you know, just try to have that happen. We did put maps on the trails on the map that are not just official trails. Like, we did use data from some Strava, which is a very popular kind of mountain biking app, and some other apps. So I think just about every mountain biking trail trail is on this map, but not necessarily all the trails, because there are, you know, I know many that aren't for backyard dog walking trails. Those kind of things are not on the map. So, anyway.
Hey, Julie Frost. I'm from Moortown and on the board of MRVBC. Not a very well formulated question, but I think it's relevant to that general topic. I'm just really curious. I think about halfway through this whole process over the last couple of years, I think it was last summer Vermont passed Act 59, which is 30 by 30, conserving 30% of the land by 2030 and 50 by 50. And I think they grappled with what conserved, you know, and protected means. But just generally, I'm curious if that played into your conversations, if it sort of made it into your planning. I know there isn't, you know, teeth with this group and jurisdiction, but you know, obviously there's going to be some important work that comes out of it for, you know, for guidance to towns and private landowners. So just really curious if that played into your conversations.
Just a tiny bit for me, and Ira will probably have a better answer. One topic I would bring up is that recreation use sometimes can be kind of the impetus to actually conserving land. So we did recognize that, and it's like, yes, the trail has an impact on wildlife on a particular block of land, but if a trail leads to the protection of a block of land from development, that can be a net benefit. So we kind of recognize that and that may be a way for us to kind of improve the current situation. We talked about, like, preserving what we have, but we also talked about wanting to go further and you know, and create more habitat from what we have. In a way, you know, there might be a way to do it in a balanced way that adds a recreation asset but conserves a bunch of land that could have been developed or could have gone some other direction. So that's the only part of it for me.
Yeah, the answer is no. We did not sort of directly incorporate the sort of language or guidance from 30 by 30 because that's still very much sort of in development. You know, you take a 10,000. Yes, right? Like the folks who are steeped in the ecological integrity side of things are sort of aware of the same background that is driving that sort of conservation goal. So it's not like we're totally disconnected. And I would just say that within the desired condition statement, we definitely left room for us as the future of this sort of collaboration and for us as a community to be responsive to those more clearly articulated goals as they come out over the next year, hopefully.
While we have not directly addressed it, others on the state level are thinking about it. Most of you have heard about the Velomont Trail, the bike trail that will be a corridor from Canada to Massachusetts. And Velomont is thinking about itself as a wildlife corridor. It's thinking about protecting wide enough area along its way, and it's a north-south corridor, so that as animals migrate north, they could be using that corridor. So that thinking is out there. How could trail corridors, long particularly north-south corridors, could also be wildlife migration corridors.
Any other questions? We're literally about to dive into 45 minutes of conversation, so there will be room for questions, I'm sure. So I think we might as well transition to the next stage, and I'll hand the mic over to Phil.
Yeah, thanks, Ira. Oh, I need to get away from the speaker. So as we transition, and as I try not to screech all of our ears out, I want to add two other quick things just to close on that panel. This is kind of taking off my co-chair hat and just as a participant in this, but that picking up on the points that were made about the abundance of trails that we're lucky enough to have in the valley, and also the fact that as we learned, every trail has some degree of impact. That part of what, when this started out, it was really about thinking about potential new trails, but as we've been engaging in the dialogue, we've also been talking about, are there potential places to consider closing or rerouting, changing some of the footprint of the existing trail network so that it's part of the restoration opportunity, I think, from an ecological perspective in all this. And what exactly that translates into, I don't think any of us know at this point, but it's on the table for conversation at least. So just as we think about, again, how to try to sort of optimize the blend of outdoor recreation opportunities and ecological integrity. And then the other thing I wanted to point out just from participating in the process is like one of the most hopeful, I think this whole process is actually really hopeful, and just I hope that you all are feeling that from the comments that have been made over the course of the evening so far. And I think that was really true in the development of this desired conditions document that we spent months on, and we started out with each of the two working groups working on their piece, ecological integrity, recreation and trails, independently, and we developed pretty solid drafts through that process. And then we came together, and we didn't know how that was going to go, but we ended up spending, 3 meetings of our whole steering committee together. So, I don't know, 6 hours, 5, 6 hours, something like that, of 15 of us, give or take, coming from across this whole spectrum of interests, going through like line by line, section by section of the document. And what it ended up in is the document that we have online and here, copies of here today, that reflects our shared perspectives on all of this. And what we found going through that is, I think, I see some nodding heads from the steering committee, a really remarkable degree of alignment, and that, it's all shared values. I think we all really believe in the same sorts of things, and that working through that and putting ideas forward to each other and listening to each other, having really a respectful dialogue and a process of listening, there's been a lot of co-learning, I think, that's gone on through that. And I guess I find it really heartening in a time where there's so much of this not happening in the world around us, that at least here we're having a conversation that is unfolding in that sort of way, and I think is leading to some really promising things. So I'll leave it on that note. Okay, so we're going to shift gears now, and we're going to break up into 5 groups, at least if that's where the energy lies. So we're going to do this sort of science fair table approach that I mentioned at the start of the meeting. We'll do this for 50 minutes or something like that. So we're going to have a table that'll be based here that Emily Friedman, our project manager, is going to be leading on the online mapping tool that Arrowwood has put together, which you've heard mention of if you've been to earlier forums or whatever. Maybe you've had a chance to play around with it online. It's an incredible resource for us of information, data layers related to ecological integrity, ecological features and assets, and recreation and trails in the valley. So Emily is going to engage any of you who are interested in a conversation at this table here. She's going to pull it up, project it on the screen. You can play around with it and whatnot, dig into it with her there. So that's number one. A second table that Ira is going to lead that is going to be back there, will be on the key ecological features that Arrowwood has helped us to identify. So it's really 13 different features, 12 of which are mapped, and the 13th of which is this sort of wildlife corridors, which we don't have great sort of comprehensive data for across the whole footprint of the valley. Ira will be leading a conversation about that. We've got a short document that you may or may not have seen that lays those out. So if that's of particular interest, jump in on the table with Ira. Laura is going to be leading a discussion back at that table on the opposite side of the room about the future of this effort of the Conservation Recreation Visioning Project. So as has been mentioned, the sort of first big phase of this is going to be closing at the end of this calendar year with the end of the deadline for the VOREC grant deliverables. But we're nowhere near done. I don't know that we ever will be actually, but we're at a pivot point. And so we're diving into thinking about where do we go with all this in the future. If you're interested in helping us think about that, jump in with Laura over there. And Chris Stevenson's going to be with her. I should have said also that Mark Haberly's going to be here with Emily, and Jim Edgecombe maybe will jump in with Ira in the back. All right, and then two more. You've heard a bunch of mention this evening about a code of conduct. So this idea of trying to articulate something in writing that could be shared with both residents and visitors to the valley around how we use our recreational assets in a way that's in harmony as much as possible with the environment. So Bob and Misha are going to lead that discussion at that table over there. And then the last table is going to be on really our shared vision, so our community values that underpin all of this. And part of our deliverables for the grant, but that we feel are really just a critical underpinning of all of this, are what is our shared vision for this integration of ecology and recreation going forward? What are the guiding principles? What are key values that we want to put down on paper and put out to ourselves and the community and the world beyond? I'll be leading that discussion with, who jumped in? Brian Littmans as well. So maybe we'll go, Ryan, where are you pointing to? Yeah, so maybe we'll just try to create some space towards the back of the room. So the way that we're going to do this is that momentarily we'll let you vote with your feet. You can go wherever you want to any of those 5 tables. And we're going to spend about 20 minutes in a part 1 of a conversation. And I'll then grab the mic and just let us know we're at that point. And if you want to switch to a different table at that point and go somewhere else for the second 20 minutes, you're welcome to do that. Or if you're in deep with whatever topic you started with and you want to keep going, that's totally fine too. So you'll have the option to do either 1 or 2 tables over the course of the next 40, 45 minutes, something like that. And then we're going to, I'll just fast forward. After that, we'll come back together. We'll see how we're doing for time, but our plan at the moment is that we'll just have a quick wrap up for 5 minutes or so, just talk briefly about where we're going with this effort in the coming weeks and months. If we have time, we could sort of have a brief group discussion all together if there's energy for that. So we'll see. Laura?
A few housekeeping items. The bar is going to close in about 15 minutes, so if you'd like a drink, please go there. And thank you so much for being here tonight with us. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, great. And the other thing is, if you didn't sign in when you first came through that door, please go back and put your name on there. One of the metrics that we have to report back to the state on is how many people are here. So that would be great if you could sign in. And the last thing is that there are little yellow index cards on the tables for you to write suggestions or questions, either about the table you're at or if you have other ideas or questions. And if you want a response, you got to put your name and email address on there. So thanks.
Great. All right. Thanks, Laura. And yeah, I just wanted Laura thanking our wonderful bartender as a reminder also just to give another shout out to George Schenk and our hosts here at Flatbread for once again enabling us to be here. No better space for a meeting so long as it's not any colder than this. All right, so again, in just a second, you can choose between the online mapping tool with Emily here. Let's see, the code of conduct with Bob and Misha over there, ecological features with Ira and Jim over there, future of CRV with Laura over there, and community vision and values with Brian and me. Oh, maybe we're just going to stay right back there in between these two heaters towards the back of the room. Strategically placed. Okay, pick your table and look forward to the conversations.
Should I duck?
So close to the valley, and we have a lot of shared values. We're very much, I was the one when I was on the Conservation Commission, led the whole discussion on wildlife farm, which I think was such a key thing when it came to our original studies, how the join the Green Mountain Walk to the Worcester area. And so the east-west connectivity is almost as important because the north-south is very normal kind of thing. Because every lot of them call longer mountains, but there's also a lot of connectivity that goes between different lots. And that creates a high genetic diversity.
It's just a question I'm so I heard
Let's all make the process no way it applies. Yeah, but it's is an intact force.
I'm wondering if I've talked to folks looking at this.
Somewhere they don't really
Example that Misha brought up. And I know it might sound a little Pollyanna, but I'm wondering rather than thinking, So I love that people are working together. I'm wondering, is it just Pollyanna for me to say that we're just slightly switch it to that asking, how can we bring, what are the benefits of these trails to the ecological area that, and how does the ecological valley have trails?
It is for environmental.
Maybe that's baked into this, but it's just somehow we talk about it, the words, but it's like, I think of mitigating this. This is detrimental, we have to mitigate it.
This is just outdated.
mean, I'm hearing it, but I don't understand. Might be interesting to put stuff together. I just want to say.
Already at a place where you said substantial so that we're not just needing taking it to a higher level is recognizing that these trails are not just for recreation, they're not just for recreation. They're just in terms of having an artery like that those trails connect to allows you then to hop on your bike and go to the grocery shop, go to your optometry, do your social things, so, you know, it's part of resilience is having strength and diversify our transportation infrastructure. And the trails are a significant part of our transportation infrastructure. And when our railroads get blown up with these floods, in places, right? You know, so I just feel like the recreation is just, these aren't just, yeah, sure, we're creating these trails, but they are part of our transportation infrastructure.
That looks like maybe that is missing in this shared vision. Right. I think there's also big pieces missing as much as it's important to get the ecological community and the trails community together. But the missing piece that you really need is the development community. Because if you don't, you know, development is such a key piece to what we do, and if you exclude the development community from these discussions, there's not going to be a lot, because people can go on, you know, some people just say, hey, we have our town, we like it the way it is, and other people do want growth. And there's, and that's what you have to really think of is doing growth smart ways, so you can get ecological protection and development of good, sound trails that are not going to different things. We've tried to start to do that a little bit more, because we do see a lot of pressures, because especially we have so much public lands, with the state park and, the upper ridge line, can't be developed anyway. So a lot of our town is already not, so there is a lot of pressure. You have a little bit less, more dispersed. But I think, I'm sure your development community has some real thoughts about trails and ecological protection.
I just had the fortune where there was every hotel quite friendly storage businesses that sprung up along the villages that supported that. And it really became an economic benefit as well as.
Yeah, it's like the Stone Ridge thing, very much. All the businesses are kind of connected. I know it's not a real wilderness experience, but, it's a good recreation experience. some people, from big cities, they think it is a wilderness experience.
All along our roads and routes, that ability to have a multimodal transportation for recreation, and also for wrenching ourselves out of our cars and using those trails. And I think one thing to really conscious of, what we don't want to do is building giant parking lots, cable off places, taking out forests and trailheads, and having, you know, that, the Green Mountain, what's called the shuttle that runs in the winter, having that go year-round with bike racks, you know, that stops at trailheads and recreation centers for tourists, encouraging tourists to, you know, having D&Bs connected to them. At a discount for home there.
That's a good point. That goes to the question I asked earlier, which I think you answered very well. It makes sense to me. You don't want to spread use across the whole network because you're introducing more people in certain areas. But my head goes to like, what happens when the parking lot is overwhelmed? Where are we provide space for people to come? Because they're going to come here in many cases by car. Part of the vision is having right-sized infrastructure to support the network that we have. And if we're paying attention to that use and thinking about ways to kind of account for it, expand that infrastructure.
The Amtrak station, a lot of things key to come into So, this summer, I also have a little hiking about Cottada, and the writer was writing about it's called the Cathedral Route, which is also over Grace. Beautiful cathedral, and then down Knifehead. The reason why I mention this is because the Baxter State Park was, as you know, was established in a very different way than other things. It was because the state at the time wasn't established. The government had plans to state benefits. But this whole set of values are very different from how it has a separate commission and is focused on ecological health of bacteria before and the appreciation which is so different because ecology is fundamental to how it's from that conversation 8 years ago was established that make us how it's just makes sense in a local way that embraces that balance and values so that our next residents or see that, feel that.
So it's totally.
I'm resisting the temptation to respond to every single one. It's all of it.
That's good though, hearing.
Just absorbing it.
And you probably had an agenda, I didn't jump in and make it.
This is exactly how
It's okay.
the kind of conversation I'm having. I just need to step in and do every word of it. Pivot point, moment.
We're also getting to be in a process, we're getting so much state conserved land that conserved land is good, but
Just a quick time check, everyone. We're halfway through our time for the table discussion, so if you're happy where you are, keep on going. If you want to shift to something else for diversity or because you've spoken your piece, feel free to do that. Whatever you want to do is good with us. Thanks. We'll keep going for about another 20 minutes.
There are others that are really poorly run, and I'd rather see something, maybe we invest some more money in improving our infrastructure for, you know, conserve life. You know, because some of them are just not being taken care of.
But your earlier point about like through interacting with developers, getting
They could be your best friends, you know, in terms of, you know, and they could provide money, which is exactly important.
so having them look to this coalition as a piece of find information, it's a trail, what kind of trail makes sense in this location?
Maybe that public-private partnership.
Yeah, right.
With this, you know, people like Bruce Myers, Steve Roberts. So we have sees that are not want to throw the baby out there. Embrace what you have and how you get that. When you look at recreation, yes, they just have too quickly. Did that. It's hard once you lose that recreation, you don't really see too much. Once you lose that reputation, it's so hard to undo. It's not only reputation, but the lack of those values. So thanks for asking the question and having this process. So I have two more thoughts. Everything is, and I don't know quite how they fit in. I was thinking of neighbor Shelby, their mission is to have some area for kids from Rainier School together. So Warren School has them. I think that's just a really, that's a great connecting point. And a great for the kids. Inequality. I actually remember that. It happens I think back to Ivory, there were four things that we came up with the planning district. Do something for the, you know, the villages that are in harm's way. Protect the forest, the big rocks, find places that is out of there's some talk. Planning district is finding those hamlets. way or not? It's too bad it doesn't.
Mini regional planning.
I would say maybe even yeah, longer. It is longer than that.
So I will try to be in response to this question.
Yeah, no, that was a question.
So the answer is they supported invited to be a part of it from the very beginning, and actually hoped and it's providing a service. The recreation district. And I think it's just a function and I mean, very candidly, I've been disappointed in that, and I think personal influential leadership. It's an ongoing process, and I hope that there have been some really pressing things. So I think there's no philosophical separation, recognition that everything this project and this conversation is about fits right to the mission and the vision and the values. It's, I think it's will be an ongoing question in the future further on whether or hopefully when the planning district is able to be at least as a more active participant in this dialogue organization.
Where those notes are that were made.
Can I just have one more thing on this? So initially, and I think 2.5 years ago, this was going to be the planning district.
Things like that.
Organization.
So whether we want to this picture in time, this moment in time, will be on this website. They said, so long as they're around. They would be happy to have us on. So if you'd like
Oh, no, that's I was just going to ask, right on the having wastewater project will help in terms of creating.
actually offloaded, this is, layers that they put together for us.
And I love the fact that you have this. welcoming most of these part of that.
Because it's talking about this intact forest walk. Haven't necessarily
It's really important because we had for a while there was a real division with some racism issues and the select board. I actually put this in that we have a declaration of inclusion in our bylaws. So I think it's really important that the community is welcoming. For inclusion, for economic, there's different economic sources. We have the working people in the board, people who live up in Waterbury Center, two very distinct communities that don't interact with
I mean, the whole idea of connectivity, that Madrigal Valley and the watershed. So we're actually Waterbury and Waterbury. Which is possible. Because it's flat. For wheelchairs. Go back there. But I think that's been lost in its we forget those things.
I totally agree about the welcoming part, that part of the vision, as well as accessibility. Back to housing, it does feel like the political headline is behind, like getting more housing in village centers, and if we succeed in getting wastewater, we've got a really great opportunity for that. We should be considering that as an opportunity also to connect these places with trails. I don't know how that works in this vision, but it's not us versus them, developer versus town. That's how we sort of work together.
That's really important. Like I did notice, and I'll ask the question, there was only one person here who was involved with snowmobile. Is there, I know sometimes even in the trails the motorized versus non-motorized, yes, I think both components coincide. A lot of people on snowmobile trails that go cross-country skiing or hiking on the trails and stuff like that. That's right. I have a lot of friends who snowmobile. They go crazy. Why don't they buy a trail pass? They use the trails for free. And those trails cost money to maintain, and they don't want to. Exactly.
That will be charged starting next year.
So it is, there's those two different, we get different communities, and it's always hard sometimes, like the snowmobile or sometimes don't like the ATVs. So it's just like, I always say, there's sometimes a place for everyone to coexist.
Appreciate you being here. It's good to get you sometime. Yeah. Placeholder. Sure.
I did want to interject this idea because it hasn't been mentioned here. There's been an ongoing group effort of frustrated black swimmers in the valley who drive great distances to swim in the world, to Berlin, Barrie, Fuller, those parts. Yeah, and we're driving these great distances as kids in swim team. So we're starting from the stages where working at various locations, a place that will be welcoming to adaptive swimmers, to physical therapy, and just general this class is the schools and having recreation accessible to the schools, but Waitsfield Elementary. I won't get into talking about the sites, but having a year-round season swimming that could be used by residents of the valley, trail systems, is really an integral part of healthy recreational activities. And I think also looking into the future as this recreation destination is a shorter ski season, snow season, going to be an alternative places for back and every high school had before you graduate high school. Definitely very it was a safety net. It was a safety net. It was a process. It was really a community organization together. It was a nice break.
Every school, public swimming pool. With sponge and skiing and things like they are, they all, we fight with our water-going pool. It's a sinking hole.
So I bring this just for raising that I will say that's outside the school. What this effort is focused on, because we should have been clear about it probably. No, we're really focusing on sort of outdoor and particularly trail-based, but trail-based and dispersed sort of woods-based. That said, it's all a bigger part of the picture of recreation and physical health and well-being and safety and opportunity against our valley. They're saying this is what I think against self-use since I moved here 2 years ago. The biggest thing that I was missing on the floor of the valley just roadblocks.
So it is.
Yet because we're in the early stages of trying to gather and articulate them. And what I'm going to say is just about out of time. So take that and so this is to close a great conversation. Thank you all. This is exactly right. And I really encourage you to not just on this document.
How we describe
We'll be also trying to, for this specific document, talking about
Could I ask one big question? Is the connectivity of the stream passage through Conference tracked part of this? Was replaced on our road, was not. It's with the state guidelines, even though we raised it. It didn't happen that way, we really wanted it. It was a missed opportunity.
short answer is yes. It's definitely more than ecologically design conditions. That's in place. Linear connectivity, streams and highways the focus of this is around recreation, ecological integrity. So if there's recreation, existing or potential recreation infrastructure that is dealing with stream crossings, then absolutely. Yes, so you heard from Mark and from Moretown Road, found one of the paths of sort of organization. So it's great. Reconvene, stay going. Don't go away quite yet. Kevin.
All right, folks, if you can grab a seat or stand around the periphery, we'll just wrap things up for a couple of minutes. So I just want to offer a couple of things to wrap up the meeting. First off, it was really energizing to just take a look around. Hey, my table in the back, can you go? They can't stop. The conversation is too good. Hey, Kai, Josh, guys, can you squelch it for a sec? Just so that everybody can hear what's going on. I hate to break off the conversations because it was really cool just to look around and see the degree of engagement at every one of the tables from what I could tell at a glance. Anyway, from my table, as one example, just a really rich and helpful conversation with some great thoughts shared that reinforce but also more importantly build on what we've been thinking about for what we were talking about back there. So anyway, thank you all for that part of tonight and just for being here. In general, for your interest, for everyone who's been watching either live or the recording of this eventually on MRV TV, thanks for joining and caring about this sort of stuff. I hope it's been helpful and of interest. A couple of things in terms of upcoming events, just to echo what Laura said earlier, the next one on the calendar to be aware of, I think, is October 20th from 1 to 3 p.m. at the new Welcome Center at the intersection of Route 17, Route 100, and the celebration of the new bridge that is a reality now after being a gleam in the eye for years. So, and to celebrate the Rec District's 30th anniversary. So really hoping to get a strong turnout of folks at that. And Ira, I saw your hand up.
Buffer restorations and tree planting at the site, so we need there's strong arms and strong backs to come plant about 400 trees.
Great. So if you didn't hear that, as part of the event on the 20th, that Sunday afternoon, there's going to be a tree planting effort, river restoration effort, with something like 400 seedlings, I guess, going in. So bring your keenness to get your hands dirty and lean in on that. So that's October 20th, and then the next event of the Conservation and Recreation Visioning Project is going to be another community forum. It'll be our last one ahead of the end of the year deadline for the deliverables for the big VOREC grant. So November 20th, it's a Wednesday night. I think we're going to be at Valley Players. And we'll have the heat on, so it's not going to be freezing. You don't have to hopefully don't need to wear your long johns. And at that event, we are going to be sort of carrying through further discussion of some of the things that were on the table tonight. So sort of much more fleshed out version of the shared vision, values, and guiding principles document that my table was talking about in the back. We'll be talking about desired trail concepts from the recreation groups, some of the things that they have in mind, and taking a look at that with an eye towards the ecological features of the valley. We're going to be looking at a draft opportunity areas map, so essentially looking valley-wide at where are the places that, from what we've learned about ecological features and recreation, seem to be the most appropriate for more concentrated recreation on the one hand, or less concentrated recreation on the other, and the spectrum in between. So that'll be an important one. Again, that's November 20th. And then between now and then, we'd really welcome and encourage all of you to lean into this process more, take a look at the documents that are on the Rec District website, and then again, that's at mrvrd.org/about-CRV, or if you just go to MRV Recreation District, you'll find the CRV page on there. So take a look at the documents that are on there, and then please, we would welcome your further thoughts by email, ideally, and the place, and questions, feedback, whatever, and the address to send those to is madrivercrv@gmail.com, and that will go to Emily, and she will gather them all and share them with all of us on the steering committee, and we'll feed it into our deliberations. So I think that's what I've got by way of closing. Anything, Laura, Emily, steering committee members?
Next week on the 16th, this is not directly related to CRV, but it is related to the health of our river and our community. Friends of the Mad River and the Mad River Planning District are hosting Shane Jakewith, who's a river scientist with the Nature Conservancy Vermont, and he's going to give a presentation at the Valley Players Theater at 6 p.m., I think, where he's going to talk about sort of the history of river management in Vermont and sort of what the future of that could look like, really with this lens of sort of ecological integrity. So hope to see you all there as well. Next, it's Wednesday, the 16th.
Great. So that's Wednesday, the 16th at Valley Players. Shane Jakewith, he is a really knowledgeable expert on this sort of stuff. And he used to live in the valley. He lives over the ridge in Huntington now. Anyway, he'll be a great source of information as we try to figure out how to live in harmony with this river and its tributaries, and also more broadly as well. All right. We'll leave it there. Happy to linger for casual conversation for a little bit longer if anybody wants, but again, thank you all very much, and we'll be in touch.